They had boat rentals operating on my lake before I even knew what was happening, with a wooden price board nailed to a shoreline post and a teenager collecting cash from strangers. Those strangers believed the lake access was legitimate, never realizing the water they were fishing and kayaking on belonged entirely to someone who had never proved any rental operation. I discovered everything on a quiet Saturday morning when I drove down toward my private dock, expecting calm water and birds, only to see a family pushing away in a rented kayak. The moment settled slowly in my chest, a heavy realization spreading deeper each second as I understood strangers were paying someone else to use my shoreline. My name is Sam Greer, 41 years old, a structural engineer based in Knoxville, Tennessee, and the owner of 12 acres on the quiet western shoreline of Heron Lake. The property had taken 15 years of relentless work to afford every promotion, every overtime weekend, every delayed vacation, slowly building toward owning land and water that would finally belong only to me. When I bought it 4 years earlier, the lake had been silent and clear, the kind of quiet place where sunrise reflected perfectly across still water. That silence was exactly what I wanted after years of crowded apartments and engineering offices filled with fluorescent lights and constant deadlines. The shoreline that came with my deed stretched roughly 200 feet along the lake's western edge where a small creek emptied into deeper water. That creek inlet made the area one of the best fishing spots on the entire lake, something locals understood immediately. But it was also clearly listed in the county records as part of my privately owned property. I had reviewed every document carefully before signing anything because engineers do not gamble with large decisions. The title history was clean, uninterrupted private ownership dating back to 1962. There was absolutely no clause connecting my property to the Heron Lake Shores Homeowners Association. That HOA governed the residential community built on the eastern and northern shores of the lake. The development had been constructed in 2008 with neat streets, identical houses, and a board of residents managing shared spaces. My land was never part of that development. Yet standing there that Saturday morning, I watched 3 bright rental kayaks tied to a dock that had somehow appeared on my shoreline. A wooden board beside it listed prices for kayak rentals and fishing access. $8 for 2 hours. $10 for the whole afternoon. Families walked down the slope from the HOA side carrying paddles like they had done it many times before. The entire operation looked organized, casual, and disturbingly permanent. I stood there for several minutes quietly taking photographs of everything. The dock, the price board, the kayaks tied neatly along my shoreline. Then I drove back up to my house and made the first call. That call was to my Uncle Ray. Before explaining what happened next, you need to understand exactly who Ray Greer is. Ray is 63 years old and retired from the United States Marine Corps after 31 years of service. His career ended at the rank of Master Gunnery Sergeant, which in the Marine Corps carries a very specific reputation. He is not huge or physically intimidating in the obvious way people expect, and when Ray speaks, he never wastes a single word. I described what I had found on my shoreline. Ray stayed silent for several seconds, then he said calmly he would be there in 45 minutes. While waiting, I called a property attorney named Donna Hatch in Loudoun County. Donna specialized in water rights and shoreline ownership disputes across Tennessee. She listened carefully while I described the unauthorized dock and the rental operation running on my property. When I finished, she said my legal position was extremely strong. Installing a dock on private shoreline without permission was already serious trespass. Running a commercial business from that location made the liability far worse. Donna told me to document everything but leave the dock untouched for now. Evidence was more valuable intact than removed. Ray arrived 43 minutes after my call. He parked his truck quietly and walked down toward the shoreline with me. He studied the dock, the price board, the kayaks, and the teenager collecting rental money. Ray said nothing for nearly a full minute. Then he simply asked one question. "What do you need?" I told him I needed him to stand there while I made more calls. Ray nodded once and stepped to the edge of the dock. He stood there calmly, arms relaxed, watching everything. Something about his presence changed the atmosphere immediately. People began speaking quieter. Some renters hesitated before stepping onto the dock. Meanwhile, I walked back up the hill and called the county sheriff's non-emergency line. I reported an unauthorized commercial operation taking place on private property. The dispatcher said a deputy would arrive within the hour. Then I made one final call. The HOA president answered on the third ring. His name was Craig Delaney. I introduced myself as the owner of the Western Shoreline property. I told him calmly that I was standing on my land looking at a dock his association installed without permission. I also informed him the rental business running there had already been reported to the sheriff's office. Craig responded with a long pause, and he suggested the previous property owner might have granted shoreline access. I explained there was absolutely no such agreement in my closing documents. I also gave him Donna Hatch's contact information and ended the call. The sheriff's deputy arrived 35 minutes later. By that time, Ray was still standing at the edge of the dock watching every transaction. The deputy reviewed my property deed and spoke with the teenager running the rentals. The boy admitted the operation was organized by the Heron Lake Shores HOA Activities Committee. 20 minutes later, Craig Delaney arrived in a silver SUV, displaying an HOA magnetic logo on the door. He approached confidently until he noticed Ray standing silently beside the dock. Something about Ray's presence forced Craig to slow down mid-sentence. The deputy handled the situation professionally and ordered the rental operation suspended immediately. By the end of that morning, the kayaks were removed and the teenager was sent home. Donna delivered a formal legal demand 2 days later, requiring the dock's removal and full financial accounting. The documents also demanded compensation for unauthorized commercial use of my private shoreline. Within 3 weeks, the HOA agreed to a settlement. The dock was removed at their expense, and the 6 weeks of rental revenue was returned to me. Additional damages were paid for commercial exploitation of my property. The county recorded a permanent document confirming my shoreline belonged exclusively to me. Craig Delaney resigned as HOA president 2 months later. The new board sent a letter promising every future activity would stay strictly within HOA property lines. Ray returned in November to help finish the retaining wall project near the house. One evening, we sat by the lake watching a heron hunt fish near the creek inlet. Ray said, "Sometimes the most powerful action a person can take is simply standing somewhere and making it clear that what belongs to you will stay yours."